Please won't you pray with me? May the words of my mouth and the meditations of all of our hearts together find their way into the heart of God this morning. Amen. In the past 6 weeks alone, we have collectively learned with new, shocking, life-upending, hard-won wisdom what it means to have our hopes dashed. And we are not alone. We travel that road together. Joel and I were talking this week about worship, and he asked me the significance of the road to Emmaus in the scripture. And I illustrated it this way, in a way that he might understand, because long before I came to First Church in Sterling, Joel and I both worked at a church in Milton, Massachusetts. Milton is a rather wealthy suburb, Boston suburb, where many middle to upper class folks are one divorce away from being house poor. My intern Mark Roble used to live there too. We're all like, re-showing up in Sterling, but we were all once in Milton. But anyway, there was a street in Milton that many of the kids went to live on part-time after their parents were newly divorced. Joel knew exactly the street that I was referring to because it was well known by all in the community, and like many suburban open secrets, it was not talked about out loud. The newly divorced or separated were essentially limited to this one street in Milton because there were very few rentals or apartments where a newly single parent could live and still be in the same school district as their children, We knew of several parents that went to live there from the congregation back then, all sort of lined up in a row. And one day, about 10 years ago now, I was driving several teenagers home from a youth conference that we had gone to somewhere out in suburban Boston. And one of the kids' parents had gotten a divorce that year, though he didn't talk about it much, and neither did we. I asked him to remind me what street he lived on so that I could drive him back home. And he responded in that sarcastic and hilarious adolescent way. "Did you forget, Robin? I live on the Boulevard of Broken Dreams," he said. And we cracked up laughing the way one laughs with relief at the absurdity of despair. We all knew immediately what street he was referring to. A poet once called cynicism that other sadness. Like so many teenagers I know, he really had it down. The disciples on the road to Emmaus were walking along that same boulevard of broken dreams, the street of dashed hopes. The disciples on the road to Emmaus knew what it meant to walk the path they had hoped not to walk, to a destination unknown and unplanned for. As they walked the Emmaus road, the disciples reflected on the death of the prophet that they had been so sure was the person they had been waiting for, their salvation. They walked along the road thinking that it was over. The chief priests and our rulers handed him over to be sentenced to death, and they crucified him. But we had hoped that he was the one who was going to redeem Israel, they said as they walked. But we had hoped. The saddest words perhaps ever uttered in the Christian scriptures. We had hoped. Past tense, we had hoped. Biblical scholars say that no one really knows much about the significance of the place of Emmaus. Not much is written about it. We don't know why two of Jesus' friends were walking there about 7 miles from Jerusalem. It's kind of a road to nowhere special. We know that they walked that road in the midst of their grief, sort of aimless, perhaps with not much of a destination in mind at all. They believed their prophet Jesus' story to be abruptly over almost as soon as it began. So you can imagine the profound, heart-heavy disappointment they felt as they walked that road, the kind you feel when a death destroys everything, the kind of loss you feel when life as you imagined it would surely not be what you had planned, the had hoped road. If you are like most of the humans all over the world right now, you are walking the boulevard of broken dreams, the had hoped road. Because many of your hopes, I know right now, are in past tense. You had hoped that 2020 was your year. You had hoped school would open back up. You had hoped to graduate or watch your senior graduate. You had hoped to have a sleepover for your 10th birthday party instead of a car parade. You had hoped to go on vacation to Disney World this spring for the first time. You had hoped to expand your small business. You had hoped to pay your employees. You had hoped to get paid. You had hoped to be able to put food on the table for your family without having to go to the food bank or the unemployment line. You had hoped to visit your aging parents in their nursing home every week. You had hoped to be at their side when they died, holding their hand where you belong. You had hoped to be able to provide better, safer care for your patients. You had hoped to save more lives and see far fewer deaths. You had hoped that governmental leadership and scientists would have found a way to get back to normal by now. You had hoped to not have to learn a new normal. You had hoped to manage to get through life with less suffering. You had hoped to stay married, stay sober, stay healthy. You had hoped you wouldn't feel so alone. You had hoped to leave a better world for your children, one that was less cruel, more kind. The boulevard of broken dreams looks different for everyone, but it is important to remember that there is no hierarchy of suffering. Shame is a liar. So please stop shaming yourselves for experiencing real feelings of grief because your situation isn't as bad as other people's. Empathy is an infinite resource, beloved. In the story we heard this morning, 2 disciples walk on a road 3 days after the crucifixion. They are clearly traumatized by the events of the days prior. They had just watched the torture and the death of their friend and teacher by the perpetrators of empire. They are going over these events together, shocked and scared for their own lives. They had just been told by the women that Jesus' body was raised, but they didn't believe it. Jesus himself ends up walking beside them on the road, asking them questions, but they don't recognize him. Maybe their eyes are too clouded with tears. Maybe their brains are so fixated on what they thought the kingdom of heaven might look like that they didn't recognize God's presence when it's right in front of them, walking right beside them. What are you guys talking about? Jesus asked them. Haven't you read the news, they say? Haven't you seen your Twitter feed? People are dying. The unemployment offices have lines out the door. Our medical professionals still don't have enough PPE. We are scared. We are scared for our parents and grandparents. We are sad for our children who are missing out on the plans we had made for their lives. What's worse is that some people care more about the economy than human lives. Is it possible, Jesus asked them, that this suffering had to happen on the way to glory? Sure, the women told us that he rose out of the grave that day, the disciples said, and we saw that the tomb was empty with our own eyes, they said. First the pain and then the rising, he had told us. But we are rational human beings and we do not believe it. Jesus calls them foolish and slow of heart, which admittedly isn't the most empathic response for the Prince of Peace. They invite him to stay anyway. They still don't recognize him, but they invite a stranger to stay with them overnight. They say, "It's getting dark. You'll be safe with us." Perhaps deep in their knowing, they remember that's what God would have had them do. Deep in their knowing, they remember these words, "For I was hungry, and you gave me something to eat. I was thirsty, and you gave me something to drink. I was a stranger, and you invited me in. What you do for the least of these, you do for me." And then the stranger takes bread and blesses it and breaks it and offers it to them. And all at once, they know who it is. They know it was him all along. They invited love in, and God was present. Then their eyes opened, the scripture says. Were not our hearts burning within us when he spoke to us, they ask, shaming themselves for not recognizing him? How could we not feel his presence? How could we not recognize his face? He was there. He was there all along. Fellow travelers on the road, on the had-hoped road, on the boulevard of broken dreams, you are not alone. So first, don't shame yourselves for not being able to find God on the road you are walking right now. You are only human and doing the best that you can. And then, open your eyes. Remember that God is always found in the strangers who walk with you. Especially as it gets darker, invite love to stay. Open your eyes. You are on the same road as the people of Italy and the people of South Korea and the people of Australia and the people of Zimbabwe and the people of Las Vegas and Atlanta and Boston. They are all just pieces of you who you do not yet know. Invite love to stay. Open your eyes. You are on the same road as the people who disagree with you. The dichotomy between those who want to open the economy and the people who care about public health is false. We are capable of caring about multiple things all at the same time. You can resist every single force that seeks to divide us. We are in this together. Invite love to stay. Grieve all that we have lost, yes, and then gently open your eyes and see what we have gained. A new perspective on inequity, a new commitment to the collective. There is no us and them, there is only us. Invite love to stay. When you open your eyes, you can see a new vision for salvation. Pave over the boulevard of broken dreams to a new destination. Invite love to stay, and then rise up and walk. God still has more to do with us, so rise. Our current predicament doesn't exempt us from our purpose, so rise. A broken heart still beats, so rise. We are not alone, so rise. The people united in God's love can never be defeated, so rise. Hell is here on this earth, and every last person deserves to be pulled up out of it, so reach out your hand and rise. Heaven is here on this earth too, so don't just sit there waiting for it to manifest itself. Rise. The power of love will overcome the love of power, so rise. Healed people heal people, so rise. When hopeless people start hoping, empire is destroyed, so rise. Beloved, as you walk the had-hoped road to an unknown destination, do not fail to notice your hearts burning inside of you. Reclaim your hope. When it is getting dark, ask love to stay. invite love in, and follow God down the boulevard of all that is broken to a world made whole again. It's not the end. If love hasn't won yet, it's not the end. Amen.